And I enjoy working at Maersk because we're really at the forefront of what we're doing. Our management really takes on that social responsibility of what they need to do. And so it's a need that we're feeling from the clients and from the industry, but it's also a need that we actually feel that we have a moral requirement to actually take care of. Especially somebody the size of Maersk. I mean, if you look at CO2 emissions.
Welcome to Podcast and Business. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Today, my guest is Anthony Ackerman from Maersk. Anthony works as a change manager of the global supply chain to reduce cost and environmental footprint on fast-moving consumer goods. In this episode, we discuss the crucial challenge and opportunities of the global supply chain and decarbonization in the maritime industry. Also, we talk about ESG in this important industry. Anthony, how are you? I'm so happy to have you today as a guest.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you doing?
I am doing great, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you today to discuss very important topics about global supply chain. Anthony, nowadays global supply chain companies are navigating within unpredictable environment. So I would like to start this conversation by asking you, what has been your experience through your career in optimizing and reducing global supply chain? What implies this optimization based in your experience?
Logistics and supply chain has always been it's a lot of problem solving and it allows you to be very creative. When I first really kind of got into this industry about 25 years ago, optimization meant a different thing, and in fact, supply chain and logistics was something that happened sort of towards the end after product was finished, and nobody really worried about it. Back in those days, it was really more about processes that they referred to as Six Sigma black belts, where you were just looking to optimize the flow. But it really, even in those days, had a real element to it about eliminating waste and simplifying things. But of course, in these modern days where supply chains are getting disrupted all the time, problems are happening, logistics and supply chain are front page news, and the added urgency of the climate crisis means that using the use of CO2s and burning CO2s and sort of trying to reduce your emissions becomes even more critical. So I think it's the focus of what is on even CEOs' attentions. I think from the early days when Six Sigma Black Belt was really, it was about sort of reducing waste. Now it's not just about reducing waste, it's really identifying what a lot of people refer to, and I first heard it coined, was the triple bottom line. I heard that first mentioned from the CEO of the Body Shop, which they took into account, where it wasn't just about the normal bottom line of the economics, but they also take into account ethics, doing the right thing, and environment, which is now really known as ESG. So it's only when you see those things cross each other that you really want to do it. And what it means really in the change of optimizing global supply chains is you want to look and see how you can move things efficiently with the least amount of CO2s, ethically doing it the right way, and not hurting people and not hitting, violating government regulations, but also still having to take care of the economic consequence.
Exactly. Anthony, speaking about ESG, one of the goals of ESG is work towards decarbonization, correct? But the transportation needs to work in this specific issue. What has been your company approach? I read some articles from Maersk, and in the first quarter of 2024, Maersk will introduce the first in a groundbreaking series of big vessels, that going to work without carbon neutral. Can you elaborate a little bit what is the role right now of your company in these challenging times?
Yeah, I think it's really on the top of our agenda of Maersk. And I enjoy working at Maersk because we're really at the forefront of what we're doing. Our management really takes on that social responsibility of what they need to do. And so it's a need that we're feeling from the clients and from the industry, but it's also a need that we actually feel that we have a moral requirement to actually take care of, especially somebody the size of Maersk. I mean, if you look at CO2 emissions, Maersk alone accounts for 0.01% of global emissions. So that's a huge number. It's basically more than the whole state of Denmark where we're
Hmm.
headquartered. What we did in 2018, we started this decarbonizing journey. We did some changes to our ships, which were really good. You can do some improvements and maybe even get a 30% improvements by slow steaming and changing the way your ships are sorted out. You can use a lot of optimization, looking at sort of how you move containers around, making sure that they're efficient and doing triangulation. But what we really realized is that to get to 100% or near 100%, you have to change the fuel.
Hmm.
Initially, when we came out with our goal for net zero, our goal was 2050. We took that, have a new science-based approach, which is 2040. And what we're doing with that is really
Yep.
investing in new ships and new technologies. So we have our green methanol ships. We've got the first coaster trial one coming in this year, and then further green methanol ships coming into place. And these green methanol ships are pretty amazing because it's a new technology, but it's one that was available, and we really kind of our management found it really a little bit difficult because we knew
Right.
people had the ability to make green methanol engines, and we asked them, can we order some ships? They said, well, we don't have any fuel. And we asked people for fuel, and we said, why are you not making fuel? And they said, well, we don't have any ships to put the fuel in. So we took a very bold move earlier this year, and we ordered the ships. We've invested in some companies to really get them moving on the green methanol. And we plan to have these 12 vessels coming into play in the next year or 2 years, and which I think, it's 12 out of a fleet of 700, so it's only a start, but I think it'll really revolutionize the whole industry.
Exact. Well, we have to start in one way. This is amazing. I read a whole article about that and how you guys are working in this path. But everything have a cost, right? What are the biggest challenge to make this change? What are the cost, or what kind of fuels we're going to use, or you guys going to use?
Yeah, so you always have to take account of the cost. As I mentioned before, you have that triple bottom line, and the economics is certainly something that everybody is aware of, especially right now in a time of rampant inflation. We started using biodiesel, which we call eco delivery. It's made from used cooking oil. It's very efficient. It reduces the emissions by 85%. It does run maybe roughly about 10% more than, say, bunker fuel. And some companies can afford it with their products. And so what we do is we do mass balancing. So with mass balancing, they pay for what they use of it, and then
Hmm.
they get a zero CO2 certificate. So it helps them achieve their goals. When we get into the green methanol ships, it becomes even a little bit more difficult, and we will launch them basically into our whole sort of fleet. The 12 ships are going to be 16,000 TEUs, so they're quite large ships. And ocean freight is actually pretty good overall. I mean, globally, ocean freight contributes to about 2% of the world's CO2s, but that's still a very, very, very significant number. But there's this interesting idea I've been looking at. And if you look at the final price and product, if you're going to make a car, for example, and you want to make a car with using zero carbon, so not a zero carbon car, but like in the production of the car, you're going to be using low carbon steel, which is made from basically a low carbon coal, and then you capture the CO2s. Now, that steel will probably cost you about 40% more. But when you pass through the cost all the way through, what it means is about a 2% increase in price to the consumer, where the companies can still make their same profit margins and keep people happy and keep storing that investment that they need. And so if you think about it, a $30,000 car paying an extra $600, it is a cost, and it's really a difficult question, and it's really a difficult proposition as well. We are in such a climate crisis. I think 2% is a very, very small price to pay. And most products, when you look at them, from a pair of jeans to a bottle of water to a car to a phone, it's somewhere between 1% to 4% more expensive to use technologies. And the other thing that you have to think about too is, as these technologies become more increasing in their usage, the costs come down. But the other thing that we're really promoting as a company, and I'm super excited to have read about this in the morning. I haven't even seen our internal release on it. We've been arguing with the IMO for a while, and Soren Skau, our global CEO, has been very vocal about it.
Hmm.
We really believe, and we're backing, that you need a carbon tax as well.
Exactly.
Business is what's going to drive this change, but you need the policies to help support us, because there's we can only do so much if you're going to then have other people
Yeah.
coming in as well.
It is I was going to ask you. The stakeholders imply as well the governments, not only companies, not only customers. In your opinion, the support from governments will be play a very important role, right?
Yeah, I mean, you need that support. You really do. You need that regulation. You need people to stand up and say, you know what, we are not going to allow ships to sail around polluting. We need a carbon tax. So either you adopt new technologies,
Correct.
or you pay a tax that basically prevents you from doing it. There isn't really a choice on it, and this is where governments come into play. AOC in the U.S. and I quite a fan of some of the policies that she puts out. I know she's a bit controversial, but one thing that she said, which I really think is amazing, she's argued saying all she's asking for is to give the same support to alternative fuels that you give to fossil fuels. And I don't think that's a huge ask, and I think it's a realistic ask.
It's correct. I want to ask you something that we are probably in common. Both, we read the book Net Positive by Paul Polman, right? Can maritime companies already are on the path of being net positive companies? What do you think?
Can marine companies? Yes, I believe so. I hope so. That's why I'm working for Maersk. I love Paul's book. I think he's so super insightful. He has so many great learnings from his time at Unilever, and he's very forward thinking in what he's doing. And I do encourage everybody to read that. I found it really opened my mind on a few different concepts. How do you become net positive? I think is really one of the big questions. And we have to play our part. I think Maersk is really recognized as one of those companies that is working down that journey. I wouldn't say we're at net positive yet, but we're taking those steps and we're making those investments. And these are not just investments to make for the short term, which we do need, but these are long-term investments that you need to make to basically guide the planet. And we're actually looking at ways on where we can actually contribute. So we exchange data that we collect on our ships with scientists to try to help give back there. We're involved in the ocean cleanup project, which goes around with ships and cleans up the garbage patch and of the Pacific and other places. So I think companies have to take that on board, and that has to be part of your ESG. Isn't just to be net zero, but net positive, as in clean up the mess. One thing that Paul said in his book, which I think is brilliant, is we broke it, we fix it. Business
Exactly.
are responsible in a large part, and also business is where you're going to find the solution. We're the ones who can innovate and fix these issues.
Exactly. Anthony, I remember like 2 weeks ago during your participation in Sustainable Insights Hour organized by The Economist, the topic was transition to low carbon energy requires systems that work and integrate very differently from today. At the end of the event, patient, you mentioned something that to me was very important: collaboration and engagement. Please elaborate a little bit about that. Why it's so important not just say is create partnership among different kind of sectors. Can you elaborate a little bit why it's so important collaboration and engagement to get these goals towards net zero?
Yeah, collaboration is key. I mean, the simple answer is that one company can't do it themselves. The bigger answer, I think, is something that I've learned with some private roundtable discussions I've had with CEOs. And as we started talking about collaboration around supply chain, it seemed to be a unilateral decision that everybody also realized that their company can only do so much. One industry can only do so much, and you really need to join forces to tackle these changes. I don't look at some of our quote unquote competitors as competitors when it comes to climate change. They have to be collaborators, and the same with our customers. Everybody, I think the old buzzword was partnership, and I think that you actually have to be collaborators, not just partnership. Problems with climate crisis are so large that if we all pull together, we can solve it. I mean, you saw this with COVID, right? I mean, if you didn't have collaboration, we wouldn't have been able to achieve the gains that we did in sort of fighting that infection. We need to take that same approach in the climate energy and say, look, we all have to work together. We all have to basically focus. And if we all focus together, we can make the change now, and we make the change in the right direction. But I'm just such a huge believer in collaboration, especially when it comes to the climate crisis. We have to join forces, and that's the only way. It's that old saying. If you want to travel fast, you travel alone. If you want to go far, you travel together. We have a far journey to go.
Is correct. Is there anything that you would like to add? To closing this conversation, what keeps you at night? What advice you will like to share with our audience to about this interesting and intense topic? By the way.
So what keeps me up at night? Certainly, like a lot of people, the climate crisis is what keeps me up. But it's not purely just climate doomism and worrying about ice sheets falling off the Antarctic and temperatures above normal and all these crazy weather patterns we're having, which are all scary enough. I try to avoid the climate doomism. I was speaking with Phil Clayton from EcoSiv, which is a really interesting organization, and he was talking about strategic optimism. And I really subscribe to that. It's about being optimistic, but seeing what you can do about it and being realistic about it. So I'd say what keeps me up at night is trying to come up with solutions and trying to be on top of this, but with realizing that the problems are incredibly real that are facing us and the challenges are incredibly large and can be daunting. It's this belief that we can actually make that change, but we have to act now. Yesterday would have been great. Tomorrow's too late, but we can still do it today. And we have to make those changes now. So I guess what keeps me up at night quite often is, coming up with ideas and trying to figure out what we can do and what I can do myself and what my company can do. We have to make that change now. And so what I worry about is that we need to get everybody on board. We need to make that change now because it's not too late. But we don't have time to wait around for some other solutions, and the solutions are there. So if we all just jump in, we can actually do it immediately. So yeah, I'm very positive. I'm excited where we are right now, just because sometimes when you're tasked with a great problem, that's when everybody pulls together. And so it's like we were talked about earlier, that collaboration. I really want to hope to see everybody collaborating together and working on this problem as if our life depends on it, because frankly, it does.
Exactly, exactly. I think, like as you mentioned, we have to work together. Even the small steps will help. Anthony, where people can contact you?
So you can reach me at Maersk, which is Anthony Anthony dot Akerman at Maersk.com. That's Maersk Maersk. You can also follow me on LinkedIn and also follow Maersk on LinkedIn. We have a lot of interesting videos that we put out and information about what we're doing with the climate crisis. There's information as well on ocean cleanup. So please look for us on LinkedIn.
Anthony, I would like to say thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Juan Carlos. I really appreciate this opportunity. I hope your listeners got something out of this and something to think about. And I welcome everybody to join us on this sort of, fighting climate crisis, because, together we can actually make a difference, but we all have to act now. I think it's the imperative is the acting now.
Exactly. I am totally agree with you. I am Juan Carlos Giraldo from Boston, United States. Thank you so much, everyone.